My name is Josephine Budge, and I'm a science fiction and art writer, curator, and aspiring pleasure activist. I do participate in, I think, a very small bubble that I think of as my London LGBTQ scene, which is very much a POC and a black space. I participate in it by co-running a queer, black, trans, non-binary club night that's also an immersive performance night called the Batty Mama. And we try and create spaces along with Hakeem Kazeem that are for both introverts and extroverts. So I definitely am involved by creating spaces. I also chair panels, I run an anti-conference that try to imagine black queer futures outside of oppression. So I participate by creating a lot of spaces. I attend other people's spaces, but I'm far more awkward in other people's spaces. And I think there's always that contradiction of thinking that space is made for you and yet feeling somehow like you're not made for the space, and how you navigate that. And the way I've dealt with that is just by creating lots of spaces that do feel right for me, and in the hopes that other people also feel right in those spaces. And I think we need a much bigger, more varied scene. I definitely feel like pleasure and joy and erotic engagement, erotic knowledges, erotic physical embodied emotional understandings are key to my lived experience as a black person, as a mixed race person, as a genderqueer woman, definitely as a part of my social activism. I'm an aspiring pleasure activist because I try to do work that makes black people feel good, and I feel like so much of our work, or the spaces that we organise in that are called activist spaces, are spaces of pain and hardship and struggle and fighting a huge monstrous enemy who will never be overcome, and facing an endless future of racism and how do we survive. And I'm far more interested in how we thrive and blossom and bloom and mutate in glorious and tentacular ways that are rhizomatic and not vertical and not reactionary, or not solely reactionary. So I run tantric inspired breathwork sessions as part of Self-Love and Ecstasy, which is my own collective of one. And I try increasingly to create spaces that are accessible, that are engaging, where simply by breathing we can draw on a massive graveyard of a million billion things that have lived, fucked and died on this planet, and each one of them have left traces of energy that are there for us to be nourished and filled with joy and pleasure, and that is our right. Two things about my body and sexuality that I love. I love my tits. I love my tits. I prayed for these tits. I spent a long time not having tits and feeling like I had a body that was like, tits were supposed to be there and they took ages to come. And so I prayed and prayed to like the moon and the sun and the universe and the fairies for tits. And when they grew very painfully in like 2 months, I was so grateful. So every day I'm really grateful for my tits, and I love them, and I love how they're nurturing and soft, and how I can lick my own nipples, and I don't have to rely on anybody else to pleasure my breasts. But if somebody else is invited to pleasure my breasts, then that's also wonderful. And I think I'm torn for the second one, but I think I'm gonna say my mouth, because I have a very extremely intricate sense of taste, and the nerve endings around my mouth and my tongue and my teeth are very engaged. I very much respond to the world by making sounds, by rolling my tongue, by licking my lips, by biting people, things, arms, clothes, hair, and for me it's all an incredibly primal, in the most developed sense of the word, and I definitely aspire to evolve into a species that communicates through biting rather than words. And one is definitely my arse and thighs, which I've been informed of, which I think is worth mentioning because I really didn't like them for so long and I felt like they took up so much space, and it's been very helpful to be in community spaces where that kind of space taking is desired and appreciated, in a lick chopping, mouth-watering kind of way. And I think the other is the way that I can hold space, the way that I come across as incredibly confident, incredibly able to hold a lot of emotions. And I always say that the confident people are usually the most insecure people, which is definitely true on my behalf, but I'm very happy to hold space when I'm not the focus as well, and I really like to create spaces that feel nurturing, caring, exciting, pleasurable. And I think a lot of people are drawn towards that, and I'm really lucky to have people who want to share in that space holding with me. So I'm gonna share an extract from a short story that I wrote, and I'm very interested in these kind of different worlds, different creations. Bear with me. So it's a small section, and you will notice how my obsession with vines and tentacles and natural forms of multiplicitous penetration comes through. Kwekua picked her way down the mutated bougainvillea vines. They had become gnarled and tough like arthritic hands, hungry for moisture, covered the cracks walls of sea-bleached husk with bitter memories, now kept by nature alone. She was one of the only foragers still light enough to make it up here, where the ground was so fragile and could not bear a great deal more weight. Burying filthy, half-bitten fingernails into the crawlerway to secure her grip, breached the skin of the swollen bark, releasing an acidically floral sap that Kwekua knew better than to inhale too deeply. Soon enough she was down, onto one of the crumbling ledges. The angry water leapt up high, stretching out waves of graphite liquid, starchy and enticing, with ripples of brilliant colour from the mercury leaks below. Wind slapped away the humid heat as ferociously as it eroded the peeling white walls. Salt stung at her scalp and eyes, working its way like angry tongues into the roots of hair follicles and embedding toxic traces of blood there, close to her frontal lobe. The ocean was a toxic and formidable enemy, yet Kwekua could not stay away. She loved to imagine the fisherwomen and warriors racing each other to the horizon in her mind's eye. The now empty ocean became packed with nets and flags, colours and ropes and bodies, dalliances of the sea when she was a kinder lover. Kwekua's fecundity had them dancing for her on their war-painted canoes, singing old songs in forgotten tongues to the heave-ho of wet fish and translucent comings in. There, a scent of hibiscus. Kwekua wrapped her thighs more firmly about the girth of her rooted mount before allowing herself to swing around and down until she hung wrong side up. Her gilas vibrated, slightly readjusted, then causing opened back up. the sensitive gill-like flaps that lined the sides of Kwakua's body, from just under her earlobes, the widest part of her generous hip bones, resonated with an orchestra of scents from over a mile away. Now, raising her head, she saw, as her senses had already informed her she would, the hibiscus flower. Black with a dark purple stigma and bright saffron anthers pregnant with pollen, Kwakua smiled. With deft fingers, all the flowers in this particular patch of vines were beheaded, although Kwakua took care to leave enough further down the vine, closer to the broken ground, as she had been taught, for the filaments to reseed. Hibiscus.